There's a specific moment. Not a slow dawning, not a gradual acceptance, but a precise instant when it finally lands for them. The realization that this time is different. That you're not in a phase. Not testing them. Not waiting to be pursued. That you are actually permanently gone. And that moment does something to a narcissist that nothing else in the entire relationship ever could. Because it's the one outcome their whole psychology was built to prevent. For a long time after you leave, that moment hasn't arrived yet. They don't believe it's real, because in their entire history, it never has been. People come back. Sources reactivate. The discarded return when called. So they wait, almost patiently at first, running their usual plays with the calm confidence of someone who has always, eventually, gotten their way. The early silence doesn't frighten them, because they're certain it's temporary. They've seen this before, and it always ends the same way, with you coming back. But you don't come back. And somewhere in the accumulating weeks of that not coming back, a threshold approaches. It builds quietly, invisibly, as each tactic fails and each assumption proves wrong, until it reaches a single tipping point, the exact moment when the possibility they refuse to consider becomes a certainty they can't escape. That moment is what we're going to examine. What triggers it, what it feels like from inside their psychology, and why it's the most significant thing your absence will ever produce. Because here's what makes this moment matter so much. It's not the leaving itself that devastates a narcissist. Leaving they can rationalize, reframe, wait out. It's the realization of permanence, the instant they understand the door is not just closed but locked, and that no key they possess will ever open it again. That specific understanding strikes at the deepest level of who they are, because their entire sense of power rests on the belief that they can always reclaim what they've lost. And I want to be clear about why we're exploring this. Not so you can savor their devastation. Though after everything, the wish to know it landed is deeply human. But because understanding this exact moment frees you from a particular anxiety that haunts so many survivors. The fear that your leaving meant nothing. That they shrugged and moved on. That all your pain and courage in walking away simply didn't register. It did register. And there's a precise moment where it registers most completely. Understanding that moment also protects you. Because the approach to it, the escalating attempts as they sense the door closing, is exactly when survivors are most likely to be pulled back in. If you can recognize the signs that they're nearing the realization, you can hold steady through the most desperate stretch, the part right before the moment lands, when they throw everything they have at keeping the door open. Seeing it coming is how you don't get caught by it. Because the cruel timing of it is this. Their most intense efforts to reclaim you come right before the moment of realization, not after. The desperation peaks precisely when they can feel the permanence approaching but haven't fully accepted it yet. That's the danger zone, the final, frantic push to reverse the outcome before it becomes irreversible. And knowing that this surge is a sign of the moment approaching, rather than evidence of genuine change, is what lets you survive it without surrendering. So let's walk toward that exact moment together. Let's understand what leads to it, what triggers the final tipping point, what happens inside them when it lands, and what it means for you on the other side. Because this moment isn't just their reckoning. It's also, in a strange way, your completion, the point at which your leaving finishes becoming real, for them and for you. And understanding it is how you stop bracing for their return and start trusting, fully, in your own freedom. To understand the moment of realization, you first have to understand why it takes so long to arrive. Why a narcissist can watch you leave and still, for weeks or months, not truly believe you're gone. It comes down to a core belief that sits at the foundation of their psychology, the belief that they are always in control of the outcome. That people, ultimately, can be managed. And that anyone who leaves can, with the right pressure, be brought back. This belief isn't arrogance in the ordinary sense. It's structural. Their entire identity rests on the sense of power over their world. And that power includes the power to reclaim. Every previous time someone pulled away, they proved to themselves that they could pull them back. Through charm, through pressure, through the calibrated application of exactly the right tactic. So the belief in their own reclaiming power has been reinforced over and over, until it's not just a belief but a certainty, woven into how they experience reality itself. This is why your leaving at first doesn't register as real. It can't. Reality, to them, is one where they control outcomes, and a permanent departure they can't reverse simply doesn't fit inside that reality. So their mind does what minds do with information that doesn't fit. It rejects it. It reframes your leaving as temporary, as a tactic, as a phase, as anything other than the one thing it can't tolerate being final. The denial isn't a choice. It's a reflex protecting the foundation of their identity. So in the early stretch, they operate from confidence. They run the playbook, the reach-outs, the charm, the manufactured crises, the provocations, not with desperation but with expectation. Each tactic is deployed with the assumption that it will work, because it always has. They're not worried yet, because worry would require entertaining the possibility of failure, and failure isn't yet inside their reality. They're simply working the problem, waiting for the familiar result. But here's what erodes the certainty: repeated, unambiguous failure. Each tactic that meets your silence is a small piece of evidence against the belief that they can reclaim you. One failure they can dismiss. Two they can reframe. But as the failures accumulate, as every tool in the kit gets deployed and every one comes back empty, the evidence builds toward a mass that even the most powerful denial can't fully suppress. The reality they've been rejecting starts pressing in at the edges. This is where the desperation enters, and it's a specific psychological event. As the denial weakens under accumulating evidence, they don't calmly update their belief. They panic, because the belief that's failing isn't a peripheral opinion, it's the foundation. So they escalate, throwing bigger and bigger tactics at the closing door, not out of strategy but out of a mounting terror that the thing they can't tolerate might actually be true. The escalation is the sound of a foundation cracking, and it's loudest right before it gives. And then comes the tipping point. It's usually triggered not by a dramatic event but by a specific quality of your silence. A consistency, a calm, a completeness that finally becomes undeniable. Some sign that your absence isn't reactive, isn't emotional, isn't a door left ajar in anger. That it's settled, peaceful, permanent. When that quality of your absence finally penetrates the denial, the belief collapses all at once, and the reality they've been rejecting floods in. They cannot get you back. Not ever. That flood is the moment. And what makes it so devastating is that it's not just about you. When the belief, I can always reclaim what I've lost, collapses, it takes something larger with it. The sense of unlimited control that holds their entire identity together. Losing you, specifically, is painful. But the moment of realizing you're permanently gone is catastrophic, because it proves their power has a limit. And a narcissist confronting the limit of their own power is confronting the one truth their whole life was constructed to deny. Let me take you into the approach to the moment, because the timeline matters and the signs are recognizable. In the first phase after you leave, as we said, there's confidence, the calm running of the playbook. But watch what happens as the failures accumulate. The tactics start to change character. The charm gets more intense. The reach-outs get more frequent. The tone begins shifting from casual to urgent, because underneath, the certainty is starting to wobble even though they'd never admit it. Then comes the escalation phase, and this is the danger zone for you. Sensing the door closing without consciously accepting it, they throw everything they have at reversing the outcome. This is when the grand gestures appear, the dramatic apologies, the sweeping promises, the sudden displays of the change you always wanted to see. It's also when the darker tactics surface, the guilt trips, the manufactured emergencies, the threats, the smear campaigns. All of it is aimed at one goal, forcing the door back open before it locks. Understand what you're seeing when this surge hits, because it will feel like the most confusing moment of your entire recovery. The intensity of their effort can look exactly like the depth of their love. They seem, finally, to be fighting for you, understanding you, transforming for you. And every instinct that ever loved them will interpret this surge as the breakthrough you'd prayed for, the moment they finally get it. This is the interpretation that pulls survivors back in right at the finish line. But here's the truth of that surge. It's not the arrival of love. It's the panic before the realization. They're not fighting for you because they finally value you as a person, They're fighting against the collapse of their belief that they can control outcomes. The desperation is about them, not you, about the intolerable approach of a limit to their power. The grand gestures aren't evidence of transformation. They're the last, frantic deployment of every tactic before the door they can't stand to lose locks for good. This is the turning point, and everything hinges on what you do here. Because if you respond to the surge, if you let the intensity convince you it's real and reopen the door, you don't receive their transformation. You reset the entire process. You confirm their belief that they can always reclaim you, you restore their sense of control, and you guarantee that the whole cycle will repeat, because they've just learned exactly how much pressure it takes to get you back. The moment of realization gets postponed, and their power gets validated. But if you hold through the surge, if you let the grand gestures meet the same calm silence as everything else, something irreversible happens. Your unbroken consistency becomes the final piece of evidence the denial can't survive. The very steadiness of your non-response, maintained even against their most intense effort, communicates the one thing that triggers the tipping point. This absence is not reactive, not negotiable, not reversible. It's simply real. And in the face of that undeniable reality, the belief finally collapses. That collapse is the exact moment. And here's the plot twist that reframes the entire surge you just survived. The intensity of their final push wasn't a sign you were close to winning them back. It was a sign you were close to the moment they'd realized they'd lost you. The desperation peaked right before the realization because desperation is what a collapsing belief feels like from the inside. You weren't being offered a breakthrough. You were watching the last resistance before the truth broke through. And once it breaks through, once the moment lands, the behavior changes completely, and the change is itself a signal. The frantic pursuit stops. The escalation ceases. Because there's nothing left to pursue, the belief that pursuit could work has collapsed. What follows is often an abrupt shift to cold detachment, or to a rapid pivot toward new supply, or to the smear campaign's final form. This sudden cessation of effort isn't them giving up on love. It's them accepting, at last, the limit they spent the whole relationship refusing to see. Let's talk about what this moment costs them, because the consequences of that realization ripple far beyond the loss of you. When the belief, I can always reclaim what I've lost, collapses, it doesn't collapse in isolation. It's load-bearing. It's connected to the larger belief in their unlimited control, which is connected to the very foundation of their identity. So the moment of realizing you're permanently gone punches a hole in something structural, and structural damage doesn't stay contained. In the immediate aftermath, they often destabilize in ways that surprise people who only knew the composed version. The confidence that came so easily now requires visible effort. The performances get strained. They may spiral into a frantic acquisition of new supply, trying to prove, mostly to themselves, that they haven't actually lost their power, that they can still make someone want them, that the limit you revealed was an anomaly rather than a truth. The speed and desperation of this new supply hunt is a direct measure of how much the realization shook them. But the new supply can't fully repair the damage, and here's why. The hole the realization punched isn't in their supply level, it's in their belief system. Even surrounded by fresh sources, some part of them now knows, ineradicably, that their power has a limit. That someone escaped and stayed escaped. That the door can lock and never reopen. This knowledge, once it enters, doesn't leave. It sits underneath everything, a permanent crack in the foundation, surfacing in quiet moments as the memory of the one they couldn't reclaim. There's often a phase of rewriting, too, that follows the realization. Unable to tolerate being the one who was permanently left, they reconstruct the story so that they left you, that they were done anyway, that you were never that important, that your departure was a relief. This retroactive narrative is damage control for the ego wound the realization opened. It may reach you through others and it may sting. But recognize it for what it is. A person frantically patching a hole in their identity by editing the past. The rewrite is proof the moment landed, not evidence it didn't. And here's a consequence that's genuinely significant for their future. Every person who successfully leaves a narcissist and stays gone teaches their psychology, against its will, that permanent loss is possible. This lesson doesn't make them better, It makes them more defended, more guarded, more rigid in the next relationship, because now they're unconsciously braced against the limit they've discovered. The moment you created doesn't heal them. It hardens them. It makes genuine connection, already nearly impossible, even further out of reach. Now turn to your side, because the same moment that devastates them completes something in you. For as long as you feared they might come back, might find the right pressure, the right words, the right crisis to pull you in, part of you stayed braced. On guard. Not fully free, because freedom is impossible while you're still defending against a return. The moment they realize you're never coming back is often mirrored by a moment in you. The moment you realize it too. The moment you stop bracing. That mirrored realization is one of the most freeing experiences in the whole recovery. Because your safety was never fully secured by their absence alone. It was secured by your certainty that the absence would hold. And when the frantic pursuit finally stops, when the surge exhausts itself against your steadiness and the escalation ceases, you get to feel, in your own body, the thing landing for you too. It's over. Really over. Not a pause. Not a ceasefire. The end. And you can finally, fully, put down the guard you've been holding for so long. The consequences diverge, as they always do, but here they're almost perfectly mirrored. They realize you're never coming back, and it collapses a belief that holds them together. You realize you're never going back, and it completes a freedom you've been building toward. Same moment, opposite meanings. For them, the discovery of a limit that haunts them. For you, the arrival of a certainty that releases you. One of you loses the illusion of unlimited power. One of you gains the reality of genuine peace. So here's the final truth about the exact moment a narcissist realizes you're never coming back. It was never the leaving that reached them, it was the permanence. And that permanence was something only you could make real, not through any dramatic gesture, but through the quiet, unbroken consistency of simply staying gone. You didn't need to convince them, confront them, or make them understand. You needed only to hold, until your steadiness became the evidence their denial couldn't survive. Your consistency was the whole force. Nothing louder was ever required. And that means the power to create this moment was always, entirely in your hands, and it still is, if you're still on the way to it. Not the power to hurt them, but the power to remain. Every day you don't respond, don't reopen, don't reset the cycle, you add another piece of evidence toward the tipping point. You don't have to do anything more than continue. The moment builds itself out of your consistency. And it arrives not when you finally say the perfect devastating thing, but when you've said nothing, steadily, for long enough that nothing becomes undeniable. Here's what I most want you to carry from understanding this moment. You never needed to win the final confrontation, never needed the last word, never needed to watch the realization land to be free. Because the moment that matters most isn't theirs, it's yours. The moment you realize you're never going back, and put down the guard, and stop bracing for a return that your own steadiness has already made impossible. Their realization is a consequence. Yours is the liberation. And yours doesn't depend on witnessing theirs at all. The steadiness that created this moment, your ability to hold, to stay consistent, to not be moved even by their most desperate surge, that's not coldness, and it's not something the relationship taught you to fake. It's the strength you built by walking through the grief, the doubt, the loneliness, and coming out the other side genuinely unmoved. That strength is real, and it's yours now, permanently. It was forged in the hardest thing you've ever done, and it will protect you for the rest of your life. And you'll find that once this moment fully lands for you, once you've stopped bracing, a different kind of life becomes possible. The energy you spent guarding against their return comes flooding back. The vigilance eases. The future, no longer haunted by the possibility of being pulled back, opens up in front of you as genuinely yours to build. This is what waited on the other side of the moment. Not just their reckoning, but your release. The freedom that only becomes fully real when you know, with certainty, that it's over. You'll have days when the old fear flickers, when you wonder if they might try again, if the door is really locked, if you're truly free. On those days, remember the mechanism you now understand. The realization landed for them the same way it landed for you. through the undeniable reality of your consistency. And consistency doesn't unravel because you had a hard day. The door is locked by everything you've already held. You don't have to keep proving it. You only have to keep living, and the lock holds itself. If you're still on the approach, still weathering the surge, still getting the grand gestures, still tempted to read the intensity as love, hear this clearly. The desperation you're seeing is not a breakthrough. It's the panic before the realization. Hold through it, and you don't lose your last chance at reconciliation. You complete your freedom. The most intense push comes right before the door locks, precisely because it's about to lock. Don't mistake the final resistance for a reason to reopen. Let it exhaust itself. The moment is closer than it feels. This is the exact moment a narcissist realizes you're never coming back. The instant their belief in unlimited control collapses against the undeniable reality of your steadiness. But here's the truth that matters most. That same moment, mirrored in you, is the instant you stop bracing and start living. You were never required to witness their reckoning to claim your freedom. You only had to stay gone long enough for the door to lock, and then, finally, to turn around and walk into the wide-open life that was always waiting on the other side of it. The moment is theirs, but the freedom was always going to be yours.